So of course, if you don't want to be seen on the recording, stop your video and it's all fine. We're going to be pretty informal, pretty flexible as we work through this, but we do have some housekeeping. Ask questions in the chat, ask them through the email to the leader of Adults Conference. Either way, we'll make sure you get an answer to any questions. We'll flow through things. Look, I have to say, given that we're a nice small audience, we'll just openly discuss things as a group, but we'll move on if there isn't much discussion to be had, because it, is a nice small group, and it might mean that we finish a little bit faster. So Rob, let's go into our content. For those who have seen some of this content before, I should be very respectful and begin with an acknowledgement of country. I'm feeling very lucky today. I'm joining you from Gunai-Kurnai land. That's where I live here in Gippsland. Feel free to put in the chat the Aboriginal traditional custodians upon whose land you live, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Victoria, where we are able to do our scouting and take benefit of the lands that they have cared for, maintained, and have a strong connection to. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and any elders who might be joining us today. So as we go into our first slide, you may have seen some content in this area from myself and other programs that we've run over the last couple of years. And this has also been quite a big topic for the Asia Pacific region Scouts. I know Demetrius has attended a number of their sessions on this topic. It's a big topic for scouting in all our communities. Today's slideshow is very reflective of the session we had at the National Diversity and Inclusion Conference last year, which CMY, Centre for Multicultural Youth, presented. So I really want to acknowledge the Centre for Multicultural Youth. I worked with Stacey from their team over the week. We weren't able to get a co-presenter today. They're still, returning to work out of the holiday period. But hopefully at future events, we'll be able to link more with CMY and scouting, because it's a great resource that we have in Victoria for our community. So what we are trying to achieve in Victoria is that our scout groups reflect our local community and celebrate the diversity in their communities. We support all our youth members to have an appreciation and respect for the diversity in our community, in our scouting unit, in our scouting group, and in our wider community in which we live. And I guess the aim as leaders of adults is being able to support the discussion and the planning and the work that happens on a local level. So that's where this slideshow is focused. Thanks, Rob. By the way, I am not very good at computers or technology. The fact I turned on Zoom, like bonus points, gold star, I get my first badge for that, I'm sure. Someone's going to post it to me. But it means Rob's controlling the slideshow for me, and also controlling the chat. So we're very lucky to have Rob join us. Rob's a venture leader at First City of Camberwell. So I'm going to use the excuse of city people are more skilled in this space. Terminology. The terminology I always use is CALD, C-A-L-D. And I realize that that's not necessarily the terminology that everyone uses in the community. So what does that stand for? It stands for culturally and linguistically diverse, but that can mean multicultural, different cultural backgrounds, non-English speaking backgrounds, migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, international students, immigrants, all these sort of categories, all this sort of language. I represent that by using the term CALD, but obviously, people use lots of different language in lots of different communities and relating to their background and their work experience. So, I just wanted to set that at the start, because people often see my slideshows and go, oh, what does he mean by CALD? In that, we're also talking about our faith communities. And it's very easy to link our cultural communities, our linguistic communities, and our faith communities together, because in all these ways, we're talking about people's cultures and their backgrounds and their beliefs forming a link, a community for them, and respecting that and making that part of our scouting. Thanks, Rob. So we are a nice small group, so we can just unmute here. And I know that we're all coming from lots of different points of experience. But I'm wondering if anyone has any experience they want to share right up off the bat in this space. I also realise that's a nervous thing to do when we are filming a session, and that not everyone wants that permanent record of their content. So feel free to whack it in the chat if it's not something you want to say out loud, because the chat stays with us just in the Zoom room.
I mean, my predominant, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My predominant, I guess I have as a like non-binary person and a bunch of different queer identities, I interact with a lot of those groups, less so through scouting, more so through uni. As a part of various clubs, I interact with a lot of people like that. What I'm interested in learning about from this, I guess, is how to approach the non-dominant rhetoric of different cultures and things, not because I don't want to introduce it, but because I'm not sure how to introduce it in a way that, so for example, I'm from the Joey Scout section. So up until now, our promise has been very centric on Christianity. How I deal with that, I know it's been changed now, obviously, but dealing with that was really difficult for me because I'm not Christian, I'm an atheist. So I literally couldn't have done my Joey Scout Promise Challenge. And being able to deal with exposing kids to different religions and cultures in a way that doesn't make parents mad is something I would like to learn more about.
Excellent. Thanks, Daz. And we're definitely going to cover some of that. We're also going to talk about, I call it tokenism in here, but cultural appropriation, which is something definitely when we're working, particularly in our program design, we need to always be thinking about. And Carol has mentioned in the chat around language barriers, that communication barrier that we can sometimes find working with particularly new Australians where there may be some language barriers in place, and sometimes finding community leaders and translation and all that sort of support to help you can be a bit of a challenge, but we'll talk through that as we get to those slides. Okay, thanks, Rob. So a bit of an idea of Victoria, that's you know, where the bigger context for where we do our scouting is our state of Victoria. And there are 260 language groups represented in our state. Victorians, there's this wonderful bridge over the Yarra River, which is a snapshot of migration to Victoria up to 2001. I like the bridge because it's an old railway bridge and trains are cool. But it's a really interesting walk, a great way to engage young people in a conversation about the backgrounds of Australians. But even since that bridge has been installed, more and more countries are represented in the background of our state. So at the moment, our government can tell us that there are over 200 countries that make up the background of people who live here in Victoria. 135 faiths identified through processes like the census. So really interesting to think that, you know, if our scout group is going to be reflecting our local community, it is going to see a number of different faiths, a number of different cultural backgrounds represented. That's always going to be slightly different based on where you might be. But yeah, you know, across the community, we definitely know these diversities exist. What exists in Trafalgar will always look different to what exists in Camberwell, but we will have those I'll show you a tool very soon that we can use to have a better idea of how to reflect our own local community. Well, today is very focused. This session is very focused on that cultural background, that linguistic background, that faith background. It is worth noting that other areas of D&I exist and will support through other parts of the program today and generally in scouting. And so, 1 in 10 Victorians are gender or sexually diverse, and 1 in 4 have experienced or are experiencing mental health problems. So those other areas of D&I are also a very big part. Demetrius, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to read that out. So within his scouting community, which is 9th Oakley, am I allowed to say that? I just said it, so I am. He hasn't shook his head at me. Just within their group, they already can recognise 13 different cultural backgrounds, 9 different religions, beliefs, just within their unit. So already showing that, when you're reflective of your local community, you're going to have this really big mix. And again, that is going to look different in different suburbs, different towns, different communities, 500 different communities for scouting in Victoria. But generally, you will find that mix, but also you may not have that mix in your scout group, but you want to respect it in your local community. Okay, thanks, Rob. So why do we engage in this topic? And I think Daz sort of highlighted this much earlier in the session as well. We do live in a multicultural community. Scouting values diversity and inclusion. We know that we're not necessarily as reflective of the Victorian community as we would like to be. So scouting is pretty good, yeah, but we're not as good as we could be. Yeah, we're not going as well as we could. So having this knowledge, having these open conversations, this helps us improve our representation of different cultural backgrounds. We know that those who have migrated to Australia, new Australians, refugee Australians, within that community, we do see significant and complex physical and mental health challenges. And scouting is a resource that can support that within the Australian community. So let's make it available to all Victorians. And, we're here to help all Victorians with their physical, intellectual, spiritual development. We provide that sense of community and connection, which supports mental health. So we can play a really valuable role in the community for young Victorians. So it's a great product to make sure all Victorians can access. Thanks, Rob. So I mentioned that, what happens in Traff will look different to what happens in Camberwell. Every different community is going to be different based on lots of different factors. So there's a few different places to find your local data and then to be able to have a think about that. The one I really like is the bottom link there. SBS has this really interactive page about how diverse is my suburb. I remember a few years ago, I was presenting at a Leader of Adults conference, and the group leader of a Sea Scout group in Melbourne's West told me that his group wasn't diverse at all, but that's fine because his community wasn't diverse at all. And we went and put his postcode into this website. And as soon as we did that, it showcased that there's actually lots of data showing that there was a lot of diversity in his community. So it just didn't have visibility to him. Now that he was able to see that data, he was then able to go and start his processes of having more discussions and looking at how he could reach out and better represent his community. Now, obviously, you may not want to use that SBS interactive map. Your local council collects and publishes this data all the time. It's what they base their service provision upon. If it's not on their website, there will be a council staff member who has it on their desktop. So just give your council a call, have a conversation, say, we're thinking about our scout group. We want to make sure we're reflecting the young people in our community. Can you help us with what our profile looks like? Obviously the Australian Bureau of Statistics and that census data, which again, you can search by postcode. Thanks, Rob. So this is a fact sheet from the Australian Human Rights Commission, which is a government agency, and it's a collection of data that they get from a number of sources. And what's important here is to know that 86% of the community wants to take action against racism. They want to create a more inclusive community. So there's a lot of support for community and community groups to be working in this space. 1 in 4 Australians born overseas, about 26% of the population, and 46% of the population, or 1 in 2, have a parent who was born overseas. So that's, really showing that, especially in cultural background, you're going to have a rich mix in community and in our Scout groups. 5.3% from the United Kingdom. So, a pretty strong showing there. But you can see there that Chinese Australians, Indian Australians, Vietnamese Australians, very big populations. And we know in Victoria that we're also seeing large amount of migration from other Asian communities through particularly into Victoria. We're a bit of a hub. We've got skilled jobs on offer, so people are migrating to our state. Thanks, Rob. So what are some of the barriers? Daz talked about a barrier that's been solved. Scouting used a lot of Christian language at a time. We've now really improved our spiritual compass and talk in a much broader understanding of faith, religion, and spiritual belief. As Demetrius says, have really increased that interreligious dialogue that occurs, where there would have been a time that Scouting would have been very much a monoculture of one faith really dominating.
Sorry to interrupt,
Yep.
but I think that was a major misconception and was brought forward for many years. If we go back and read the books of Baden-Powell, not the others,
Yep.
you find out that speaks about spirituality, but never declares a religion. He was very much aware that the British Empire at that time was not one religion. And he never used a specific term. He was using words as God, Lord, something, spiritual or stuff, but he never said the Christian faith or
Yep.
that faith. He avoided, but whoever came after that, as in many cases, tailor-made it to what they came from.
Absolutely. And so that's a really good thing to remember, that the founder of Scouting, Baden-Powell, really did have a worldview. He wanted to see this movement in all sorts of communities across the world. So he had an open view. Obviously, that got contextualized in Australia, where we do our Scouting. And right now, we have a very strong program of the spiritual compass and exploring spiritual belief that has taken away one of the identified barriers. Other barriers, so language, and Carol mentioned that right up at the start, definitely has to be a barrier that we know about. We also know that there can be gender stereotypes, and you've got to remember, a lot of people who are migrating to Australia are coming from countries where they may not be familiar with Scouting, or if they are familiar with Scouting, they're familiar with it in a different way to how we deliver it in Australia. We deliver it in Australia for young people regardless of gender, or young people of all genders, however you want to phrase it. We offer it in Australia. That's not necessarily the case in every country around the world. And so sometimes we're going to have to challenge some of that and bring families along with us for the journey to understand what Scouting looks like in Australia. Our Scouting is often community-based, not school-based or not sponsored by a host organisation. So again, that can look different to what Scouting did in people's home countries. Thanks, Rob. So these are just some of the tips that over the years of running these slideshows that people have come up with. And please throw in the chat any suggestions you have. But one of the really big things is if you can get culturally diverse volunteers in your Scout group, that's going to help. And particularly if it's adult volunteers, because they can talk parent to parent. So, you know, think about that as one of your recruitment priorities. If you can bring in these sort of local champions, it can help and help increase diversity. You might want to, and it's definitely something that we've done on a branch level, is deliver some resources in languages other than English, particularly if you know you have a particular target market. So if you know, for example, that there's a big Vietnamese association nearby to you and you can work with them, then that might be a direction you go in. Making sure that there's content in the programs that are going to engage and young people are going to respond to. That outreach and community festivals is definitely a way, and where I know that with a lot of my scouting, I've been able to meet and engage with cultural groups is through festivals and celebrations. Making sure young people's stories are shared and part of your group and your group life and your group culture, so that you can, as confidently as Dimitros did, you can say, we have this representation in our group. The reason he knows that is because his kids have been able to share that and feel comfortable and confident in sharing that. And educate yourself. Dimitros is saying that should be mandated. Look, we provide lots of opportunity in Scouts Victoria. We are definitely lobbying national to keep this as a conversation that is always ongoing in Scouting. We know that it's a big conversation for the Asia Pacific region of Scouting. So there's also lots of international opportunities to have discussions and content in this space. Thanks, Rob. And I think we've covered this. So we'll go again, Rob, to the next slide. So one of the big things for us in Scouting, so what these last couple of slides have been is, why is this stuff important, really? And what do our young people get out of it? One of the big things for us is that we talk about in our promise and law respect. And we want to cultivate that with our young people. We want to teach the skills of that. And understanding different cultural backgrounds, understanding different faiths is a great way of our young people developing that. So a really strong part of what we do is Scouting. Thanks, Rob. Poor Rob is spending his life just hitting the next button for me.
You're keeping me on my toes, Wombat.
And you know what? I'm going to say thanks, Rob, again, because these guys will have seen this quote a million times. So we want our Scouts to learn about their own cultural background and identity and develop that sense of self-identity. So encouraging that through your unit councils, through your activity planning, through what happens in your programs and the programs of events that you're part of is a great thing that Scouting can be doing. We want our young people to learn about and appreciate cultures, faith, identities and tradition other than their own as well. So it's that case of being able to bring your own cultural identity and traditions and background into Scouting, but it's also about understanding that of the other Scouts around you. So we've talked about the respect, but also we want to actually put some language around what is prejudice, what is racism, and how that can be challenged. That's part of what we can teach young people. And so that might be the next level. If you've already done some programming in this place, that might be the next level that your unit council takes some stuff And we can definitely support that through state if needed. Thanks, Rob. So celebrating different cultures, and I've put there the words Beyond Harmony Week, which was Harmony Day, which in Victoria also links to Cultural Diversity Week. These events have been there. Harmony Week, I'm almost 40, and Harmony Day and then Harmony Week has existed for almost all my scouting. It's, I think we've got to get beyond that. I don't know if people disagree, but it's definitely not the tool or vehicle that we have available to us, or the only tool or vehicle that we have available to us. So, you know, we've got to think about the other opportunities we have. And what are those local opportunities? What are the festivals and the events that happen in your own community? Now, one tool as a unit council or as an event team you might look at is the list of cultural and religious events that is on the Harmony Day website. So if you Google Australia Harmony Day, then you'll be able to find the list of every cultural event, faith event. And that's a really good one to look at, because then that can go, okay, there looks to be, you know, we've got a big Indian community in our area. There looks to be a big Indian festival, you know, Holi or one of those others coming up. I wonder how we could link to it. And that might start, you know, members of your unit or your group or your district exploring that. Thanks, Rob. So avoiding cultural tokenism, which is my way, which might be, you know, might be a bit of a biased way of expressing cultural appropriation. So thanks, Rob. That's the heading. Here's the content. You know, firstly, what is cultural appropriation, cultural tokenism? It's you know, where we take someone's culture and we use it. And it might be well-intentioned, but we use it in a way that either oversimplifies or doesn't actually reflect how that part of their culture is used. It can sometimes really continue the stereotypes or the prejudices that they experience, and not necessarily be the positive thing that we want. It can include things like putting cultural artifacts out on display. You know, we want our young people to be able to explore different cultures, but we want to do that in a way that's respectful of those cultures. And the example I can often think of is people might have at home some artwork or something that is culturally significant to the Aboriginal community, and they bring it to the Scout Hall. And if we haven't had those proper conversations about how we're going to use this item, it's also in there, like people who go and just try and recreate Aboriginal art, for example. So they might bring along an example of a boomerang that has a cultural meaning where they purchased it, when they purchased it as an artwork to bring home. And then all of a sudden they ask the young people in front of them to, now let's all draw and do our own boomerang patterns. Well, if you haven't explored that within the context of where that boomerang has meaning, where those logos and those symbols have their meaning. So in other words, if you haven't worked with an Aboriginal elder or artist on that topic, you could actually be being more disrespectful to the culture and to the Aboriginal faith, particularly with their artwork, than you would want to be. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense to people. It can be tricky because we want to celebrate cultures. We want to have things like, you know, you might do a harmony night where you say to people, bring things from your own cultural background. So you want people to be able to do that, but you want to do it in a way that is respectful. So show and tell is a nice, good way because it's the person owning their own culture and their own identity. Asking everyone to dress up in Native American headdresses without having any explanation or support from a Native American community, that's a bit challenging. Does all that make sense? That was a lot of words, and I'm not sure if that made sense. Okay, thanks, Rob. Daz gave me the thumbs up. So I talked about, you know, the next step that we have when we're teaching respect includes teaching our young people how to respond to prejudice. So these slides will go up on a website and you can work your way through that. But particularly if members are saying they have experienced discrimination or prejudice, you want to give them the opportunity to speak up about it. You want them to be listened to, using all those same techniques you would use for things like child safety or bullying, you know, using those here in these contexts as well. You know, feel free, and some people don't often want to do this, but when you are talking to young people, feel free that if you have your own experience of a time that you felt excluded, of sharing how that felt, because that can assist our young people with forming their thoughts and feelings around this space. So encourage that reflection, encourage that discussion of respect, and you know, listen to people, particularly when they're sharing their individual experience and story. Thanks, Rob. So obviously I've used lots of facts and figures here, so I made sure I gave you the links to where if you want to go get those, you can. And I think that might be the end of the slides. Usually if a slide says references, it's the end of the slides, but Rob will hit the next button and we'll see. It was. So is there any questions? I'm not sure how I've done for time, but. No, Daz is fine for questions. So obviously in our Term 1 programs, we have the opportunity to celebrate Cultural Diversity Week, which is the Victorian State Government celebrations. We have Harmony Week, which is the Australian Government celebrations, but hopefully they're just the start of what's in district programs and group programs, and more opportunities are there. Demetrius, you have a question? Oh, I don't think we can hear you.
Maybe that's a better way. My earphones betrayed me. My question is, are we going to bring back the interfaith training? Not as in a badge like the awareness badge, but for the leaders. One thing that troubled me in the first place, and that made me go out and ask people that were of the either faith or no faith and educate myself, is that it's a different thing of being of faith or having a faith of no God, because that's also reality basically in Asia. And we say the word atheist or no God, but there are different things for atheist or agnostic, and people don't know, they hear the word. It's huge difference, and usually we approach everything in the same way. Yeah, I entered the training Kaisit, and 8 training sessions, that each one lasts 2 months. You have to go through projects with various people all over the world, just to fail my 2 first subjects intentionally, because I said, okay, I've been studying, I've been educating myself for 48 years, and I found myself in level 1 again. So maybe we should bring that back. We tried, Scouting was doing that up to 2018, and then, oh, we're all diverse and we can stop it. No, we're not. We are not.
I think you're absolutely right. That's definitely training and content we can reschedule and bring back in over the next year, over the coming year and into the year after. We're always adding stuff in, and you know, every now and then we go, oh, we've done that a few times, we might rest it. But you know, we've just come out of the 2 years of COVID, and there'll be lots of opportunity to put on events and training and opportunities for leaders and adults to explore these topics. Absolutely. And what Dimitros was mentioning there was World have a training program, and in there is a topic area on faith and religious inclusion, and you can go do some units in that. Did you say there were 8 units, Dimitros?
Now, the world units are not active anymore, although in some regions we do have trainings like South Africa, South America and stuff, but in Asia Pacific it's not operating anymore. So I had to go to the Interreligious Forum, the KACIID, and then you roll in yourself and you enroll yourself, and after that you have to go through. Yeah. It's not only Scouts, but you get along with people of any religion or non-religion, and you actually find out how to approach, or especially how to communicate and how to solve things when they just appear on the side before they become a matter.
Yep.
For my group was the major thing, because 9 different religions plus the atheist and an agnostic, and 13 backgrounds now, were more a couple of years ago. The possibility to make a mistake or to insult someone was more than 50%. You said something and it's like, hey. So you had to educate yourself again.
Yeah. Excellent. So we can definitely look, bringing that right back to Dimitris' start point, we can definitely look at what is scheduled and offer opportunities. Any other questions or comments? Then I think I am very close to my time limit. In fact, Robbie's giving me that look of, you've gone over it. We were meant to be having coffee now, but that's okay. I'm allowed to be naughty, Rob.
You've technically got 4 minutes.
Till the next session starts, but he needed a break because he's got to run the Zoom room for the next people.
No, next session's not for another 15 minutes. You're all right.
You're a good one, Matt. You've got 4 minutes left.
There you go. So look, thank you everyone for your time. This is never designed to be the one-stop point of these conversations. And I know that many people here, like Bob and Dimitris and Faye, have been to these slideshows before and seen this content before. Hopefully you're seeing the continued evolution. I keep collecting in all the feedback and the comments that come through, and we keep adding them in. And if we, each year keep growing from what we're already doing to what we can do next, we'll keep improving our local scouting. So thank you everyone for your time today. Thank you to those watching the recorded version, and enjoy a coffee before the next session.